EOR, PEO, staffing agency. If you're a growing company, these terms show up in every HR vendor pitch, appearing as interchangeable solutions for outside help. But treating them as identical services carries a severe cost. Selecting the wrong model risks compliance violations, burning your operational budget, or delaying a critical hire by months. The distinction rests on a single question: who is the actual legal employer of your worker? From that core answer, everything branches out. Cost, compliance risk, and the control you retain over your team all flow directly from who holds that title. Evaluating these vendors by comparing their headline prices before establishing your legal standing guarantees that your strategy will fail from day one. An EOR, or employer of record, is a provider that becomes the sole legal employer of your worker in a foreign country. While the EOR handles all the legal administration, like payroll, contracts, and taxes, you retain full operational control of the worker's daily tasks. A PEO, or professional employer organization, acts as a co-employer. They partner alongside your company domestically to share the burden of HR duties. However, a PEO has a critical limitation. It requires you to already possess a registered local legal entity to function at all. A staffing agency operates as the sole employer of temporary workers, pulling talent directly from its own private bench. In this scenario, you are merely renting the labor. The worker is the agency's employee and never officially belongs to your organization. Each model represents a distinct tier of legal ownership, dictating exactly who carries the administrative and legal burden of employment. Let's look at the financial inputs, starting with an EOR. The standard market rate is a predictable, flat premium fee ranging from $400 to $699 per employee per month. But that headline rate ignores a major operational cost. Most EOR providers require a mandatory upfront deposit equal to 1 month's gross salary per employee. For a 10-person team, that locks up tens of thousands of dollars before anyone even starts working. A PEO looks much cheaper on paper. The input cost is typically $40 to $160 per month, or a low percentage of your total payroll. The catch is the infrastructure required to use one. Maintaining the required legal entity costs between $18,000 and $96,000 annually in legal, accounting, and registered agent fees. Then we have to factor in liability transfer. If a labor law violation occurs, the two models handle the fallout very differently. An EOR takes on full legal accountability. Because they are the sole employer, they absorb the international compliance exposure and shield your company completely from the risk. A PEO uses a shared liability structure. If there is a payroll mistake or a benefits error, both you and the provider are held legally responsible. That high monthly premium you pay in EOR is the direct price for total liability transfer and avoiding corporate entity setup. A PEO is simply an administrative add-on to a legal burden you already carry. The staffing agency model operates on a totally different financial structure. Agencies charge a markup of 25 to 75% on top of the worker's hourly rate. And if you decide you want to hire that temporary worker permanently, you face a steep penalty, a conversion fee that usually eats up 15 to 25% of their entire first-year salary. You pay this steep financial premium for one specific structural advantage: the immediate deployment of pre-vetted talent. If you have a sudden seasonal spike in operations and need bodies moving heavy inventory immediately, an agency can have them on site in days. Relying on a staffing agency for a long-term hire is a financially ruinous decision, but for absolute short-term flexibility, it is a justifiable premium. We map these side by side. First, entity requirements. EORs and staffing agencies don't need a local structure. PEOs do. Next, liability. EORs and staffing absorb the risk. PEOs share it. Finally, onboarding speed. Staffing deploys in days, EORs in weeks, and PEOs take months. If you compare these three models strictly by looking at their monthly price tag, you ignore the reality that each one is engineered to produce entirely different operational outcomes. Identifying the correct model for your business requires matching your specific operational needs against a clear, structured decision rule. Look at this decision tree, starting with the root question: are you hiring internationally with no local entity? If the answer is yes, because you are entering a new foreign market without an entity, an EOR is your mandatory starting point. If the answer is no, and you are operating domestically, you move to the second question. Is the role you are filling permanent? For a permanent domestic role, a PEO makes sense to offload your HR tasks, provided your corporate entity already exists. But if the role is temporary or project-based, you drop down to the staffing agency. It is the required tool for seasonal spikes. The single most common and expensive mistake expanding companies make is entirely skipping that first foundational question about international entities. Even if you start on the right path, there is a specific scaling threshold where the EOR model stops making financial sense. We call this the EOR-to-entity crossover point. For most growing businesses, that exact numerical threshold sits squarely between 10 and 25 employees in a single foreign market. When your headcount is below that number, paying the EOR premium is vastly cheaper than paying to establish and maintain your own corporate infrastructure. But once you cross 25 employees, the math flips. You need to establish a local entity, absorb the compliance risk, and transition off the EOR to save on compounding margins. Choosing a hiring model is a living strategy that has to evolve alongside your global footprint. To compare localized provider matrices and run full cost breakdowns, visit HRStacks.com.